a group of BIPOC students and young professionals that Greenbiz awards a scholarship to attend Circularity. And we're going to be hearing from Brian Lewis, who leads that program.
Oh, wow.
And he's going to be introducing some of them today, which is extremely exciting. But I know both of us are kind of excited to get out of New York City. We're both Brooklyn-based and be in beautiful Seattle for this conference.
Yeah, I heard it rains a lot in Seattle, but it's been nothing but sun.
Yeah,
out
we've
here.
gotten really lucky.
Amazing weather.
It looks like the weather cleared up just in time for Circularity 23.
Yeah.
And we also have the governor of Washington joining
Yeah.
us, Jay Inslee. So that should be really interesting for our keynote lineup. Yes.
I think designing for circularity from the ground up. That was the session that I was in earlier today, and we got to hear from practitioners at Cisco, Eileen Fisher, and Amazon about how they're embedding circular design principles in their products and services, and what are some of the challenges that they're facing. I guess, Nathra, I'd be curious to hear from your perspective around how do you put the circular economy into your day-to-day. It's easy to talk big picture, keynote, but at the end of the day, it's about the actions that we're all taking. So how do you kind of work in that space?
I mean, on a very personal level, for me, it's really, I have a close tie to the fashion industry, and fast fashion being such a prevalent industry and where my family's from in India. So I really love to engage in the circular economy through textile brands. Some of my favorites include Veha, which they are, great champions of circularity and, vegan leather and all types of things like that. Huge thrifter. Love to, engage in reuse and reduction as much as possible in my own life. And then also very avid composter at home.
Yeah,
so,
I definitely second that compost thing. Every time I bring up the topic, I'm pretty sure my family's already sick of me talking about composting. But I love it. I love composting. I love being able to take, that organic material and ultimately get it back into the soil. I think I have this vision of enabling as many people as possible to reuse their objects. And so it's like, what would happen if everyone in your neighborhood started just bringing their coffee cup to the coffee shop, right? What kind of big swings can the general public take at shifting us towards a circular future? Those are the topics that really kind of get me excited. And also, I do love vintage shopping as well. I'm not wearing any vintage pieces today, but I probably should be.
I know. I thought I was trying to I'm proud of, but I mean, I think what you touched on, we're going to be covering so many wide varieties of topics here at Circularity, and some of them just really boil down to a granular level, like thinking about how we can implement circularity in our daily lives to project onto the broader, society and community and operations that we bring to our organizations. I'm hosting a roundtable lunch later on the idea of convenience culture and how it's, lend itself to the lack of circularity in our society. So, there's so many things to touch on, Kenny. I am excited to see our amazing keynote program. And I think that what makes this conference really special is that we're touching on so many different elements of circularity. For example, governmental and policy actions. For example, the keynote on navigating negotiations and the Global Plastics Treaty. We're talking about social elements of circularity. We're talking about the economic implications of circularity. So, the triple bottom line, all the great things, and it's gonna be something. And we have our big little talks, which are going to be really innovative.
Wow. What's down over here? We have Gen Z's role in shaping the circular economy. I hear that Gen Z has a pretty big influence in shaping this dialogue, as well as like a lot of spending power, right? And so they're really, more than any other generation that's come before them, really prioritizing sustainability among other issues, but really prioritizing sustainability as kind of a motivator for purchase decisions. And so there's an increasing amount of expectation that brands need to respond to, environmental, social factors as well.
I agreed. I think Gen Z has a huge emphasis on transparency and accountability in our space. I mean, I've never seen a generation so in the best way, ruthless about calling brands out and holding them accountable. So I'm really excited to see that conversation. It looks like we have about 10 seconds here before our keynote start.
All right. It's exciting. I feel like I'm at like an Apple launch event
right.
for circular economy.
Exactly. Well, this is a place to be for all things circularity. So we're excited to pass it on to the keynotes, and stay tuned for some amazing conversations between us and some of our great interviewees today.
Yeah.
Please welcome to the stage Chief Executive Officer at Washington Conservation Action, Alyssa Macy.
Etsukti Wegwa, Alyssa Macy, and I'm a citizen of the Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs and the CEO of Washington Conservation Action. First, I want to acknowledge all of the elders in the room. It is customary in our culture for elders to speak first, so thank you for allowing me to speak before you. Today, we acknowledge that we are on the traditional and ancestral lands and territories of the Coast Salish people, the Suquamish, the Stillaguamish, the Snoqualmie, and the Duwamish. It is a privilege and an honor to live and work here. We are grateful to you, the original and current stewards of this land. The life we enjoy today is a direct result of their sacred relationship, the connection to native lands and ancestors. While we acknowledge that land acknowledgements are intended to be respectful, they oversimplify the complex tribal histories and fail to recognize the ongoing impacts of colonization that Native peoples face. That being said, the practice of land acknowledgements needs to evolve, and that evolution must happen within ourselves. The first step is that we need to educate ourselves about the tribal nations and indigenous peoples in the lands that we live in. And we need to deepen our understanding of Black and other people of color, cultures, and communities. With deeper understanding of one another, we can see our connection with one another, the humanity of one another. We are all connected, and I'm not just talking about you and me here in this room. Let me tell you a little bit more. My mother's people are from the Southwest. She's Dene and Hopi, and my father's people are originally from Inchiwana, the Big River, also known as the Columbia River. I was proudly raised on the Warm Springs Indian Reservation in Central Oregon. Tribal nations from our region have many stories and origin legends about salmon and its relation to our indigenous cultural identities and lifeways. In my people's creation story, we are taught that the Creator put all living things on the planet, the four-legged, those that fly in the air above, and those that live underwater. Plants and trees were created, land masses were created, the cosmos were created. The last thing to be created was man and women, and we were pitiful, and we couldn't take care of ourselves. The Creator gathered all the living things and asked that someone come forward to help man and women survive. The first to come forward was Waikanish, or the salmon, and they gave themselves to our people so that we could survive and thrive along the banks of Inchiwana, the Big River. In exchange, our people made a commitment to ensure that Waikanish would always be here, that we would always take care of them as they gave their lives to sustain ours. This is our sacred obligation, our promise to always take care of the natural world around us, to ensure that Waikanish survive, our relative, and that we survive and thrive. Salmon are a keystone species, essential to nature, and a multi-million-dollar industry here in the state of Washington. Salmon are also integral to tribal nations throughout the Pacific Northwest, up to Alaska and down to California. We are salmon people. Waikanash also provides for other species like orcas, eagles, bears, and more. When they spawn and die, they provide nourishment to the land and to the forests, shorelines, and waterways. When salmon are abundant, it's a data point telling a story that we have clean air, clean water, healthy forests, good land management, and thriving communities. I often think about our relationship to Waikanash as I think about our relationship to this planet. I can clearly see how we are all connected. Our bodies are made up of 65% water. We breathe the air that the fish and the forests and the four-leggeds and other plant lives cleanse for us. We grow food and we raise animals on the land. We fish, we hunt, we gather, and we feed our spirit by being outdoors in one with. We are nature. Without any of these, we would not be able to survive. And our connection to nature also connects us to one another. And as such, we cannot harm one another or the environment without harming ourselves. When you apply this thinking to business, it tells us that our business decisions must take more into account than just profit. We must ensure that the impact of our businesses through product life cycles are not degrading our environment or our communities. As the MacArthur Foundation writes, circular economies must eliminate waste and pollution, circulate products and materials at their highest values, and regenerate nature. Indigenous ways of knowing teaches us that all living things are interrelated and that we are mutually dependent on one another. Mother Nature, in all of her brilliance, created life that all serves a purpose. Water nourishes our body. Plants give us food and medicines. Trees give us breathable air. Bumblebees dance amongst flowers and pollinate. Wind and solar generate energy. Even the pesky things like mosquitoes serve a purpose, as they are an important part of the food chain. Returning to this understanding of our interconnectedness changes how we interact with the world. We would never destroy the homes of our relatives, so why would we make decisions to cut old-growth forests, pollute our waters with plastic, and overproduce products that end up in landfills? Even today, we have this sacred obligation to take care of this planet. We have the opportunity to create sustainable products and services that integrate our understanding of place and relationship to all things. If there was ever a time to do this, it is now. Mother Earth is telling us in so many ways that she needs our help. She needs us to remember that we have one planet and that what we do today and our ability to thrive in the future depends on our decisions. So let's make good decisions together. In closing, I would like to read a poem by Raina Priest, a member of the Lummi Nation, who was selected in 2021 as the first Native Poet Laureate for the state of Washington. This poem is called Love the People. The trees are people, the animals are people, the plants are people, the fish are people, the whales are people, the mountains are people, the oceans are people, the prairies are people. Love all the people. The people are people, no matter what color, who they love, how they live, or what they believe. The people are people. Love all the people. With all of my love and gratitude, welcome to Sital and the lands of the Coast Salish peoples. Thank you.
Please welcome to the stage VP of Circularity, John Schmeya.
Wow, that was amazing. Can we give Alyssa one more round of applause? Welcome to Circularity 23. We've got 90 great minutes planned for you this afternoon on this keynote stage. It started with that amazing talk to ground us to this place, and also hopefully help us imagine grounding ourselves to our own places, wherever those may be. We'll also meet our emerging leaders. We'll hear more about this beautiful lady on stage with me, and we'll hear about the Global Plastics Treaty negotiations from 4 people who just returned from Paris and the negotiating conferences there, if they're still awake by the time we get to them. They just flew in. And so much more. So buckle up. I'd like to start by thanking you all for being here. I understand, as someone who was in corporate sustainability just over a year ago, that you are being pulled in a million different directions. You are being asked to do more with less and build your company or your organization's circularity efforts. And I am truly grateful that you've decided to devote some of your time to be here with us this week. Last year in Atlanta, we had 900 people come together to nerd out on the circular economy, and it was an absolute blast. This year, here in Seattle, we have over 1,400 attendees. The growth of this community, is just so amazing and so fun to watch from where I sit and be part of. And I encourage you all to take full advantage of this great community here this week by learning together, by taking advantage of our many networking opportunities to build new connections, and maybe even as important, having fun together. I'm also grateful to be in this city and to bring circularity to the Pacific Northwest. The work in the circular economy that's going on in this region is so inspiring, and I'm sure you'll all feel right at home here this week, and that's in no small part because of the great contributions and partnership we've had with the city of Seattle ever since we decided to come here, and I would love to thank them for that. If you see anybody from the city, make sure to say thank you for having us. If you'll indulge me for just a second, I want to talk about a recent time when my personal and professional lives intersected. I love music. I'm not a musician. Don't ask me to sing or play an instrument, but I love music. I'm actually planning to go out to the Gorge Amphitheater for 3 shows just this coming weekend. If anybody wants to chat about that, find me later. Anyway, one of my favorite bands is Death Cab for Cutie. Between my love for their music and their origins right here in Washington, I felt like I had to quote them at least once today. One of my favorite lines from their most recent album, fittingly, I think, for this conference, titled Asphalt Meadows, is, "While the frontiers are ever expanding, our living rooms fall into disarray. And no one seems interested in fixing what they've broken. They just sweep up the pieces and slip away." I think these 4 lines do a pretty good job of describing the economy that we've collectively built over the last century or so, sadly enough. Nearly all of our organizations have contributed to the ever-expanding mess of extraction, of waste, of soil degradation, environmental racism, social injustice, and the list goes on and on and on, all in the name of growth at all costs and above all else. All this happens as the places we hold most dear are crumbling under the pressures of resource extraction, biodiversity loss, changing weather patterns, and that list also goes on. We only have one Earth, and we share it with countless other species, even though that number goes down every day because of us. And, you know, I'm not quite ready to concede that we should just colonize Mars. We have a responsibility to fix this place for future generations as well as for the other inhabitants of it. There's a huge opportunity in avoiding waste in the first place, but there's also a huge opportunity in fixing what we've already broken. We've swept everything away so far by pumping more plastics into our waterways, more synthetic chemicals into our soil, and more carbon into our atmosphere, all to serve our convenience-driven throwaway economy. In order to step past this broken system and into the future, we need a modern, post-industrial, circular revolution. One that is able to step in and clean up all these broken pieces and find new high-value uses for them. Better yet, let's avoid those broken pieces in the first place through durability, repair, refurbishment, remanufacturing, and reuse. A new circularity gap report by Circle Economy and Deloitte recently reported that global circularity has actually decreased from 9.1% in 2018 to 8.6% in 2020, now all the way down to 7.2% in 2023. This number is not an abstract. It represents waste in our supply chains, waste in our manufacturing facilities, products being disposed of too early and in improper ways, and so many other issues that we have in our economy right now. This steady decline, even as awareness and action around circularity is increasing, is sobering to say the least. This community of people in this room, we do a lot of things, but one thing we don't do and should not do is give up because of these numbers that we're seeing. The slide in circularity is distressing, yes, but it's also a reminder that without our efforts, without the efforts of the people in this room, we'd be headed even faster in the wrong direction. I see in front of me current and future leaders who must do something different, who must teach society how to move past this current status quo, and who must build a better future. Let me share with you what I think we need to accomplish here this week while we're together. Obviously, we have to learn together. That's part of the reason we're here, but we also have to unlearn. We have to unlearn our habits. We have to come to terms with the reality of this transition, the messiness it will create, the creativity it will take to move towards circularity, and the challenges that lie ahead. We are all really familiar with this linear economy. Quite frankly, it can be hard to imagine anything different. This room is full of great intentions. You are all here because you think we need to move from linearity to circularity. And I understand, as you all do, that this work is not easy, can often be overlooked, underappreciated, and underfunded at our organizations. But you're devoting your careers to this effort, and I applaud you all for that. This room is also full of action. You've collectively implemented pilot programs, designed products to be more circular, and designed new recycling, reuse streams, and the list goes on. Because of the actions of the people in this room, we are starting to see the makings of the future. It's showing up in new business models that support circularity. It's showing up in innovative product design for the second, third, and even uses beyond, tracking and traceability technology, EPR, right to repair, and other regulations that can help level the playing field to move towards circularity, and others. All that being said, we are not moving fast enough, and we are not going big enough. This week, let's all take our great intentions, mix them with the learning, the networking we're going to do here, build new partnerships for the future, and go back to our day jobs with a new conviction to move forward and to make measurable change. We are here this week to move from intention to action. Now it's time to get to work. If you'll allow me to, I'm very excited to announce our next speaker to the stage. Elected in 2012, Jay Inslee is the longest-serving governor in the country. During that time, Washington has seen historic economic growth and has consistently been ranked as one of the top places to live, work, and do business. He has led the fight on climate change. He's also put major investments into education, behavioral health, and housing. He's helped families through the paid family leave program and the Working Families Tax Credit. I am personally a huge fan of Governor Inslee. I am so honored to welcome him to the stage. Please welcome Jay Inslee. Thank you for being here.
Good afternoon. Welcome to Washington State, the home of Jimi Hendrix, Brandi Carlile, Macklemore, and now the guy who just won the #1 singing contest in America. We're very proud of our state. We're also the most humble state in the United States as well. I want to welcome you here. I want to know who I'm speaking to before I make a few comments on circularity today. First off, if you're a runner, could you raise your hand? If you like to run, if you're like a jogger, raise your hand. Okay, that's good. Now, if you like to ride bikes, raise your hand if you like to ride bikes. Okay, that's good to know. Now, the people who are runners, I want you to look around at the people who are bike riders, because they have discovered a new invention called the wheel. It's circularity at its best. It's 10,000 times more efficient than the pounding on pavement. If you believe in circularity, try a bicycle, folks. I'm just suggesting that to you. I want to tell you why I'm so excited to be here with you today, and I really am. It's because I'm with some of the most important people on the planet today, and here's why I say that. We all have challenges today. We know the challenges we have getting laws through Congress, through our state legislators, recalcitrant governors sometimes. But I believe this is the best time to be alive in human history. And maybe this is the best day of Washington history to be in this beautiful environment we've got here today. And here's the reason I say that. There is no other time in the history of mankind and womankind where what we do is so consequential. This is not some little trade organization group having a meeting to see how we can sell a few more widgets. This is a meeting to determine how we can save humans and civilization for the next several centuries. There is no more consequential time in our history on Earth than the kind of work that we're doing together. So I feel a kinship with everybody in this room. We're doing work that surpasses anything else any other generation has faced, because this is a decision whether humans are going to work together to continue civilization as we know it. I think it's a good time to be together in Seattle to talk about a circular economy. Now, as I address this, I want to suggest the word economy is too small for what we're doing. I majored in economics. I respect economics. It has to do with things that cross on a graph. I figured that much. But it's too small of a description of what we're doing here today, because we're trying to build a system that won't destroy the Earth as we know it. Economics is too small of a box to put this in. This is everything. This is whether we're going to have glaciers on Mount Rainier, whether we're going to have salmon in our rivers, whether my kid, I got to see my 6-month-old newest grandkid the other day, and last week he was having to breathe smoke from the Canadian fires. This is circular everything, not just the circular economy, if you will. And we need to think of the economy as a tool to preserve the health of our state more than an end itself. Now, I'm glad you're in Washington State, because we're proud of some of the work we've been doing here. We get this. We understand we have to make a more circular system. We have one of the highest recycling rates in the nation. We're proud of that. We're proud that when China put a fly in the ointment on recycling, we developed the Washington Recycling Development Center. We're proud that we have the Next Cycle Washington Business Accelerator to help the development of these industries. We're proud we're going to have the first sustainable food center begins next year to address food wastage, which we know is such a problem in our nation, in our state. So we're proud of some of the work we've done, but we're not done. We have started 5 extender producer responsibility laws on electronic waste, on pharmaceuticals, on paint and batteries, on e-cycle, and we've collected over 450 million pounds of old TVs and computer parts since 2009. Our paint care program has collected 1.5 million gallons of leftover paint, most of which has previously been in my basement at one time or another, I'm pretty sure. And our battery stewardship program kicks off in 2007. We have several laws in our books banning single-use plastics. So we are taking significant work, making significant efforts toward our mutual goal here in Washington State. But we're not done yet. We have yet to pass the granddaddy, if you have, a grandmother of an extended producer responsibility law. I'm fighting to get that in the next session of the legislature. Give a round of applause if you want legislators to pass our bill for the RAP Act. We got some great leaders who've worked on this, Representative Berry and others who've worked so hard. I hope to make that a reality in the next session of this legislature. We made good progress in the House, but as a former member of the state and U.S. House of Representatives, we know the Senate just takes a little longer time to understand it. So we're hopeful that we're going to get this done. I want to thank the Pacific Coast Collaborative that's been working on this. I'm so proud of the West Coast on this, and the work we've done in our 3 states and British Columbia. We look forward to you continuing our mutual efforts. I want to extend our discussion to something, though. I think when we think of the circular economy, the immediate thing that jumps to mind is, plastic bags and old paint and food waste. I think we have to have an equal emphasis on a circular energy economy. We need to understand that when we think about the circle, it has to apply to joules and ergs of energy, not just molecules. And I say that because that's the ultimate way we're going to save ourselves from climate change. And that's why we need to adopt in every state in the union what we have here in the state of Washington. One of the best, most economically and environmentally just cap and invest programs in the United States, a low carbon fuel standard, essential ban on new introduction of natural gas. You know, there's a law in physics, when you're in a hole, stop digging. We should not be hooking more things up to dirty gas in this state and in this country. So I hope that in your discussions and your thought process, you'll base the idea of a circular economy. And we can do this in so many ways. I was in Finland the other day and saw capture of waste heat from wastewater, right? So when sewer water comes back, it has heat in it, right? It comes off our showers. We now have systems, including a company right here in Seattle, that can capture that heat and heat, without mixing the water, of course, capture that heat so it goes back to our showers again, so you don't waste that. Every time we have a net zero home, we have a heat exchanger where we don't waste heat venting air out of our homes, because we have to do that, of course. We exchange it for heat coming in. So we have energy as a circular part of our system, not just mass products, if you will. If we do both products and energy, our kids are going to have a chance. So again, I want to thank you for what you're doing. I want to tell you that you're some of the most important people in the world, because you are people in your professional lives who are helping my grandkids, who have been certified as the 6th cutest grandkids in the state of Washington. So thanks a lot. Keep up the great work. Let's go build a new economy. Take care.
Please welcome to the stage Program Manager at Greenbiz.org, Brian Lewis.
Hello, hello, Circularity. How y'all feeling? Good? Y'all feeling okay? Okay, all right, cool. My name is Brian Lewis, and I am the new program manager of Greenbiz.org and our illustrious Emerging Leaders Program. Here at Greenbiz, we're all about connecting and convening people and creating conversation, and this program is certainly no exception. Our Greenbiz Emerging Leaders Program connects and grows the next generation of sustainable professionals of color. Since 2017, we've nurtured a community of 200 plus exceptional young, diverse leaders of color from across North America. Yes, yes. And they are all actively changing the world in which we live. For each premier Greenbiz event, just 10 exceptional young leaders of color are selected from among hundreds of applicants, except for this cohort. We were so pleased to have so many amazing applications. We have 13 amazing Circularity 23 emerging leaders. And each of our emerging leaders receive all expenses paid access to Circularity 23, airfare, hotel, everything. And as well as ongoing development and professional mentorship opportunities. And today, I have the honor of introducing this year's exceptional cohort. They hail from across the world, coming from as far as Ghana and Japan. And they bring a diversity of perspective that is inspiring, invigorating, and enlightening. And some are breaking into circular fashion and design, and some of them are leading the way on plant-based products and sustainable agriculture, and some of them are bringing environmental justice to distressed communities. But what unites them all is that they're all really great people. They're all amazing people, and I've gotten the chance to meet them over the past month, and I'm very excited for you to meet them as well. If you wouldn't mind standing, please welcome our Circularity 23 emerging leaders. Yes. Yes. Thank you, thank you. Most of us are aware that our sustainability industry has a diversity, equity, and inclusion problem, right? Especially among our leadership. Our boardrooms rarely reflect our communities. And while we've made significant progress, especially for women in leadership, the experience of being a person of color in this industry is sometimes quite isolating. For example, before joining Greenbiz, I could count on one hand how many black men I knew that were leaders at sustainable organizations. One hand. And that isolation has far-reaching impact. We struggle to find mentors. We struggle to be seen and to access opportunities. And we struggle in many respects with the feeling of being an imposter in an industry that has yet to reflect who we truly are. And this is why our Emerging Leaders program is so critical. Because not only do we open opportunities for young leaders of color to experience a world-class sustainability conference, but we use this as an entry point to engage them in a critically connected, well-resourced, and diverse community of peers we call our Emerging Leaders Network. And as a part of this network, we engage our members in regular meetups with industry leaders like yourself, allowing them to stay connected to the cutting edge of sustainable progress. We provide mentorship from the Greenbiz Executive Network, the Circularity Network, Nature Networks, and all of our peer networks. And we leverage our connections to open opportunities for jobs, speaking engagements, and professional development. And ultimately, we envision a community of sustainable, diverse, young change makers who are actively supporting one another as they lead the charge to a more sustainable and equitable planet. But like any great endeavor, we cannot do this alone. I'd like to thank our current partners, LinkedIn, United Airlines, and Google, for helping us seed this opportunity. But we'd like for you to join us in helping to carry this vision forward. Later today, we'll have a breakout session where you'll have an opportunity to meet each one of our exceptional young leaders. And I'd like for you to start a conversation with each one of them. But also, if you're interested in joining us in helping to take this to the next level, please have a conversation with me so that we can talk about how to take our Emerging Leaders program and greenbiz.org into the future where we have a sustainable, young community of amazing, bright young superstars that are actively changing the world and creating sustainable opportunity for all. I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much. Enjoy Circularity.
It's tough to follow Brian. He is very sharply dressed, I feel. Very inadequate right now. I had a chance to meet all of our emerging leaders a few weeks ago, and let me tell you, I was so impressed by them. Me at that age was a complete disaster. They are so driven and so smart. It's an amazing group of people. All right, let's move on to our next talk. So we have 5 lightning talks scheduled for you between today and tomorrow on our keynote stage. These lightning talks are about 4 minutes long, and they're really meant to convey big ideas briefly. Our first lightning talk features Brad Parks, Conservation Education Director at Ashore. He's going to tell us about the work at Ashore, as well as introduce us to this lady on stage with me. Please welcome Brad to the Circularity stage.
Hi there. I'm Brad Parks, Conservation Education Director for Ashore, and I'm honored to be here and so excited to share with all of you what we do at Ashore. As you see here, I say we because we is not only the staff and volunteers of our team, but also Zorabelle and our animal advocate sculptures. She's a rockhopper penguin, and you'll find her here this week to greet you as we're enjoying her on the stage. And downstairs, you'll find Dandelion, the tiger tail seahorse, who is there to greet you at the social media stage. If you take a closer look, feel free to gently touch them, take photos, and then tag Washed Ashore Art and share on social media. Washed Ashore is not only about our sculptures, but it's really about the ocean. We really are focused because we're based in southern rural Oregon coast with 2 locations of Coos Bay and Bandon. There, for over 12 years, we have created art to save the sea. And we've worked with hundreds of volunteers to clean beaches, reclaiming plastic, and then using them in these sculptures that are giant and purposeful with the intention of showing the scale of the plastic crisis, but also using them to educate and represent the species affected by this. Washed Ashore's art is described as shockingly beautiful. When you look up close, you'll know why. Or like I titled the slide today, or the presentation, a beautiful solution to an ugly problem. So with this, our fleet of nearly 100 sculptures travels the country with creatures like you see depicted here, a magnificent jellyfish, life-size humpback whale tails, even a bald eagle with a 17-foot wingspan. Our sculptures travel the US and Canada to places like zoos and aquariums and gardens to educate people about plastic pollution and inspire individual and community change. Can you see what I'm holding up here? If you can, it's a bottle cap, just a piece of trash. But like collective action, one bottle cap is trash, but thousands of pieces together can combine and create art. At Washed Ashore, we believe that working together, guided by a common goal, we are stronger. Whether it's piece by piece, beach by beach, together we're advancing sustainable development. The ocean plastic statistics are devastating. We'll hear more about it in just a moment from the panel. It's a global tragedy causing disastrous consequences for the health of our planet. Though awareness has risen globally, the ocean plastic crisis is getting increasingly worse and has been only aggravated by the recent COVID pandemic. So, Washed Ashore inspires individuals then to strive towards a circular economy where our seas are free from plastics. Every day we work towards running out of art supplies and a world where we're no longer even needed. The global problem is this big, feels overwhelming to many people on the individual level, which is why we work at the community level where people can come together, contribute, and be part of the solution. So our sculptures are designed to inspire people to reduce consumption, reuse, recycle, replace, even refuse plastics. Our impact is amplified through educational workshops and partnerships with like-minded change makers. And as you can see from some of the statistics here, we're becoming a global community on a big mission making an impact on this problem. So, Washed Ashore is proof that working together, little communities, little actions, can make a big difference for species like Zorabelle and dandelion and others around our planet. Thank you so much, and happy World Ocean Week. Thank you.
Awesome. All right, isn't this penguin great, though? Seriously. If you haven't taken a picture with the seahorse yet, be sure to. She's beautiful. Okay, atmospheres and oceans don't adhere to state lines, and neither can the solutions to the issues that plague our environment. Plastic pollution is currently found in basically every corner of the world, and country-level action has thus far not been enough to turn off the tap of this plastic pollution. Last year on the Circularity keynote stage, we heard from Aaron Simon, who introduced us to the Global Treaty on Plastics that had just been announced about a month before. And it really symbolized the nation states of the United Nations moving toward draft language for a global plastics treaty. The second of these negotiating conferences just wrapped up last week in Paris, and we are lucky enough to have 4 people who are actually on site in Paris here to discuss the progress towards the Global Plastics Treaty. So please welcome Rob Opsimer, Executive Lead for Plastics and Finance from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, to the keynote stage.
Good afternoon, everybody. I must say, it does feel a little surreal to be here in Seattle, given we were with the 4 of us just a couple of days, all in Paris. John asked before, are you still awake? How are you?
Riding the waves of exhaustion.
Excellent. But I'm really, really happy to be here again with all of you. Aaron, I promised to get your title right, so I'll try to do that. So, Aaron, VP and Head of Plastic Waste at WWF. Liz Nichols, who's Foreign Affairs Officer at the US State Department, and then Alison, who's a Global VP for Packaging Sustainability at Mars. So Aaron, actually, I wanted to start with you. We were all in Paris last week. What were we actually doing there? Why were we there? The treaty, what is it all about?
Yeah, so as John mentioned, I think for those of you who are here last year, I stood on the stage talking about this life-changing moment, really, that happened in March of last year when all of the UN member states unanimously agreed to adopt a resolution that would allow us to negotiate a global treaty to end plastic pollution. And I implored at that time for businesses to get involved, to be engaged. And that's because treaties come about and are necessary when there is urgency and the need for alignment, global alignment, to really tackle something. And we've got these great studies out that say if we just continue with business as usual, we're going to have twice as much plastic produced in less than 2 decades, and 3 times as much will enter our oceans and our ecosystems. So there's quite a bit of urgency, right? And in the past 5 to 10 years, we have been proliferating voluntary initiatives, right? Businesses setting major global targets, the global commitment. We have had collective action. We've had governments putting out policies. But what has not happened is us slowing down plastic pollution. We truly need this global alignment on how we're going to, as a global community, address this shared threat. And more importantly, there has never been a major global crisis, environmental or not, that has been solved without that global alignment, right? That is us coming together as a world and saying, all right, here's what we're going to all do, here's what we're not going to do. And there's some really good examples of these that we can learn from. Montreal Protocol, that was scientists raising the alarm about ozone-depleting substances, and the UN member states agreed on a list of problematic substances, these ozone-depleting substances that we could set a path to reduce production and use of. We have other examples like Basel, and that's about transparency. You all are masters of supply chains if you're in business in the private sector, right? It's really hard to manage what you can't see within your supply chain, and therefore it's really hard to manage materials as they pass through these global supply chains without understanding what they are and assuming that we're going to get high-level secondary materials out of them if we don't, right? There's other examples, but really, at the end of the day, what we want to end plastic pollution is alignment from the world on what we're going to start with, right? How are we going to agree to play in this space? How are we going to agree to set measurable targets together and measure progress, have milestones? How are we going to have specific measures for really promoting circular systems like reuse and recycling? And how are we going to align on what's problematic in the system, what's high risk, and not just from a waste perspective, but really looking through the whole life cycle of plastic. Where is it problematic? Where is it causing human and environmental concerns? So this second National Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee meeting, which we call INCs, was the second of 5. The next one will be this fall. It's fast, because another thing they agreed on last March was that they were going to do it in 2 years. So that's quite swift, but definitely at the speed that the world and our planet needs. So we'll get into more Q&A tomorrow at the second panel, which will be primarily engagement. So if you have more questions, but hopefully that'll start us out with some level setting for this conversation.
Well, thanks so much, Aaron, also for pitching the panel of tomorrow. That's excellent. So if I paraphrase, really, I mean, it's clearly a big deal, and it will impact everyone in this room one way or another, this global treaty. Now, Liz, if we go back to last week, we were there in Paris, the second session of the INC, the second out of 5. Do you feel, you representing the State Department, that week that INC met what you had expected?
Thanks very much, Rob. I only have to go back to yesterday. I just got back like 12 hours ago. Well, thanks for setting the stage, Aaron, also. I think that overall, absolutely, this last week was a complete success, probably for 3 different reasons. So as Aaron had said, we're the second of 5 meetings in this process, and this is, what you've seen on TV, UN treaty talks. But each of those meetings is supposed to be a little bit different. So the second in the series is typically when governments would come together, articulate their views 1 tick more in a detailed fashion, often with a little bit of something to react to. Those views will get recorded, and then those will all go into, ideally, ultimately a request that we make to the Secretariat of the process for a 0 draft. And that will be a literal rough draft of a treaty text with all of the options, the many different options that folks have tabled. So the first thing to say is we did manage to request a 0 draft. And that's a big deal because that was not guaranteed. I think it was a week of, maybe even historic kind of drama and procedural meanderings. I think the second thing I wanted to say is that I think that this week was also a success because it helped clarify where some of the divisions are and where they are not. So without having a lot of context to go on, I think we've all seen also in the media that there's been kind of this rote sort of play up of United States versus European Union in views. And we've seen that film before. It's kind of a standard thing that happens at these bodies. But what we saw this last week was the development of a really broad and coordinated coalition of countries. 16 at least intervened on the mic, but we think that's up to about 40 who reacted to the documentation for this week and the process that's been set out so far with a huge degree of concern and skepticism that their voices weren't being taken into account. And I think that we can safely say that while there's diversity in that group, those voices and what they're looking for out of this are at a different place on the ambition gradient. And so one additional thing I think that came out of this week was a little bit of a reclarification of the narrative that, the US and the European Union and others who have joined the High Ambition Coalition, the ambition level is the same, end plastic pollution by 2040. The governance paths that we have available to us are really different. So different roads, but the same Rome. So I think that was helpful. And maybe the very last thing I'd say is that we've seen before, the United States tends to play a kind of uniquely constructive role in this. It's a thing we do and that we're very good at. And we had the opportunity to put a lot of that on display this week. The US unlocked the 2 big dramatic sticking points. And so I think we've set a good tone for being a collaborative partner for the few meetings ahead.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Liz, and also for your leadership on this topic. Now, I can imagine for some people in the audience listening to this, and thanks for also unpacking some of the actual, like what actually happens in those meetings and listening to things like 0 drafts and procedural wranglings. This is a very different world than the world that most of us in the room, including myself, are used to operate in, and it's a world that's run by diplomats and negotiators. So really keen to hear your perspective, Alison, engaging in this process as a business. How has that been for you?
Yeah, I would describe last week in Paris as everything, everywhere, all at once, because it was crazy. Last year when Aaron and WWF asked industry to get involved, we were like, yes, but how? Well, we want to get involved, great, but how? And then will they actually listen to us, right? We weren't sure how we would engage, because in some of the examples that you gave earlier, industry voice wasn't maybe as welcome as the treaty process is welcoming industry voice. So there was a really great coordination effort by WWF and by EMF to establish a business coalition, which kind of organizes a bunch of the companies from industry to say, how can we have a really strong united voice to input into this treaty process. So just a little bit about the Business Coalition. It was an amazing experience to be part of. I'm sorry, can I go one slide back, please? So the vision for the Business Coalition, first it has over 100 companies, so that was really exciting to be part of this great thing that's bigger than yourself, with 100 companies coming together with a united voice to industry, to NGOs, to government, about what we wanted to see in a global treaty. We wanted an ambitious, effectively and legally binding treaty. And again, we were convened by Ellen MacArthur and WWF. And it was really a good way to help coordinate us, again, 100 different companies across multiple different industries. And you can see the wide array of industries that were represented, and figure out what is the best way for us to have our positions heard. And what was really amazing, there's a couple times Aaron and I were walking in between events, and we literally felt goosebumps, right? Like, I'm very fortunate that in my day job, I get to have a pretty big impact on packaging sustainability. But being at the Plastics Treaty and being part of this business coalition is that at a whole nother level. You're working with 100 different industry peers in a coordinated way to be able to discuss some very important points with government delegates that will really impact the future of this industry. So that was really exciting, and I just gave some examples here of ways that we were able to engage. Some pictures, we were able to give statements during the plenary. We were invited to speak in side events. We were meeting with delegates in between sessions, and really inspiring. There was a 12-year-old who actually spoke in front of the plenary, and that was another goosebump moment to see how he made a plea for his generation, and making sure that we're considering their future as we look at a treaty to end plastic pollution. So a lot of once in a lifetime goosebump-raising moments, and encourage everybody to look at the Business Coalition. We'll give a little bit more information later if you want your voice to be heard as part of this process.
Well, thanks so much for that, Alison. And I just want to spend a moment still on that the importance of business engaging in this process and how unique that is. And I was at just before the formal week kicked off in Paris, was at a ministerial event where a couple of ministers from countries really all over the world made that point. And I just noted down one quote that I wanted to share with you. So one of the ministers got on stage and said that it's really unique in a global agreement that there is such strong support by business right from the start of the process. And this provides a really strong foundation for an ambitious and speedy resolution of the process. So it really does matter. And thanks again, Alison, also for your leadership on that. Now, I don't know how you're feeling about this. When I'm hearing you speak, I hear life-changing moments, I hear goosebumps. I'm starting to get really fired up about this process. And it's actually also, I think, what's important to note, those processes may have the image of being slow, but this one is actually going really, really very fast. We're running 6 monthly sprints now. We've had 2 in the run-up to the first session, the second session. There's 3 more, and then it's done. So it's really happening now. So with all of that in mind, if we imagine everyone in the room is kind of feeling feeling fired up, and it's happening now, what could people in the room do, and how can we engage? Aaron, over to you first.
Well, I think last year I said that this was an opportunity for legacy, right? It's very rare in sustainability, in conservation, to be able to see the result of your advocacy, your influence to drive such holistic change. Like, that is basically unheard of in this space. And so right now, businesses have a chance to shape it and partner with these member states to do this, right? And so maybe you don't want to get involved at that level because it's big, and it can be overwhelming and lots of goosebumps and sometimes very frustrating. But I think just like coming from some of the notes that John was mentioning in his quick talk, where he said, it's time to unlearn, right? There are actions you can take in your organizations today, right? Thinking truly about moving to a circular economy. He also said with coming to terms with change. I got to be honest, no matter what this treaty looks like, whether it is as ambitious as WWF wants it to be or some other version, it's going to change the way we do business. That is happening. So it's time to really get comfortable with that and think about your industry, your business, your sector, and what that means for you, and either get involved in shaping that circular economy or be ready for what comes down as a result of that. because it is something that is happening. And then I would say take action. Don't wait for that. You're already seeing just the negotiations themselves are catalyzing policy, they're catalyzing action. So don't wait around. And even if you're not in plastics, if you're in another sector, we're talking about municipal solid waste, whatever material you use, it is going to be impacted by this. It is going to trickle to apparel and to all other things. So it's coming, which is great because that's why we're here. We want to move from linear and go big, right? Seed the change within your organizations and when you have the power to, because I think we don't really have a lot more time to waste. So.
Terrific. Well, thanks, Erin. And I want to take the opportunity, because we're already starting to head towards the end of the panel. I just want to take the opportunity to also thank you personally for the fantastic partnership on this topic. It's been really extraordinary to work together. So very clearly hearing call both to lean in to this process and actually to take action at the same time. And that's something I would very much reinforce and also just point out how they're mutually reinforcing, because it is the action that businesses are taking today that provide both many of the insights and then the actual position and the confidence to be able to influence in this process. Yep. So thanks for that. Liz, from your point of view, what can businesses do?
Businesses can tell us what they want and what they need. I'm really grateful to Erin and Allison for their amazing engagement in our stakeholder processes in the State Department, but also all of the other 15 agencies across the government that we work with. Everyone runs some kind of process where we bring in voices from the business community, industry, civil society, NGOs, academia. If you're not on our list and you'd like to be, find me. Let me fill up your inbox. And I think the thing I'd like to say too is that the kinds of input that we want are going to iteratively shift as these negotiations develop and the window of what's possible shifts. And I guess I recognize that the US government today, we occupy a certain Overton window of what we can and cannot do. And that window is also subject to change. And the way that that gets changed, without getting fired here, is for stakeholders to exert continuous change through their legislators at the federal and the state level, and through their policymakers. And I make myself and the State Department available for that. And then selfishly, I'm going to put in a direct plug. So within the treaty negotiations, my specific role is to guide the US in developing the financial architecture for how we put together roughly $3.4 trillion, which is what the OECD estimates is going to take to fully make a plastics transition. A lot of that is public money, most of that is not. And so I would love to work with all of you to find ways that the private sector and all of the good internal investments you're already making in production and manufacturing and everything else, how we get those on a ledger counted towards the objectives of the agreement so we can draw direct links between action and what we're doing in those rooms. Thanks.
Well, thank you, Liz. And I think really important call out indeed to engage both internationally in the big international process, but also here in the States domestically. Allison.
Yeah, I'd echo what everybody has said so far, and Erin and Liz. Get ready for action, right? There's a lot of voluntary action going on right now with the EMF Global Commitment. There's a lot of voluntary action and understand what kind of reporting you can do. There's plastic packs. So get involved to understand what might be coming at a global scale in a more mandatory way. Erin mentioned that there's some industries that weren't maybe as vocal in the plastics treaty negotiations as I would have liked to see them. So if your company is involved in plastics in any way, you should get involved because this will impact you. I didn't see as many textiles, healthcare, automotive, some of the other industries as involved. So this is a plea for other industries and other organizations to get involved. And if you want to do so, you can scan this QR code. This will take you to the Business Coalition homepage so that you can sign up. It's free, so we're not asking for any money. It's just a way for your organization to get involved so that your voice can be heard in the plastics treaty. You heard from Liz, negotiators are actually asking for industry input, which is super rare. So let's take this opportunity to make sure that our voices are heard.
Well, thank you so much. So It's a big deal, the treaty. It will impact all of you. It is really worth leaning in, and there's a very, very practical next step to do so. So please do sign up to the Business Coalition. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Design products that people can buy less of and fix more of. The mindset is really simple, but the design challenges are not. When you think about it, why limit a product by the lowest common denominator of subassembly or part when you can make the part swappable or replaceable to extend the lifespan? This isn't a new idea. There are great examples like Framework and Fairphone who are working really hard to make this happen in their own products. There is a lot of work that goes into changing a product that would sell as a single unit into a fully repairable product ecosystem. Not only do you have to consider its use case, but now you have to also consider its repair case. In the long run, we will buy less, waste less, and learn more. For engineers, this is a step in making better products, and for consumers, this is a step towards more sustainable consumption. My name is Riley Blackner. I'm an electrical engineer at Synapse Product Development, and this is my Big Little Talk.
I love the Big Little Talks. That was one of our finalists this year in our Big Little Talks competition, Riley Blackner. Tomorrow we'll have our winning Big Little Talk on the keynote stage. I'd like to take this opportunity, though, to thank all of our sponsors. We could not put on events like this without them and bring this community together every year. So our sponsors are crucial to that. I'd also like to thank our community partners and our sustainability partners, who also help with things like planning content. A lot of our community partners are experts in different spaces within the circular economy, and so we rely heavily on them to make sure that we're giving you the most up-to-date content we can. And then our sustainability partners, of course, help make these events more sustainable through zero waste and composting and food donations and all the things that we like to do to make sure our conferences are as sustainable as we can make them. Watershed is our net zero partner this year, thanks to them. Carbon Direct, who's going to offset emissions associated with Circularity 23, so that's amazing. Up next, we have our second lightning talk, and this one features a founder and innovator. I was able to visit the new Campston Rather recycling facility down in Carlsbad a few months ago, and this place is super impressive. So here to talk about recovering critical minerals for the future is Chief Innovation Officer and founder of Campston Rather, Aaron Kamenesh.
Afternoon, everybody. How are you? Impressive room. I think I'm going to take that home with me and put it in our lobby. My name's Aaron Kamenesh. I'm the founder, co-founder, and the Chief Innovation Officer at Campston Rather. And I want to give you a little history of how we started out. So let's get into it. Okay. So, as kids, we all have these big dreams. I had a big dream that I wanted to be an astronaut and go to Mars. So I went to Penn State, studied aerospace and nuclear engineering, and that's what I thought I should do. Well, unfortunately, reality has a habit of crashing into our dreams, and I didn't get my mission to Mars. So I did the next best thing. I ended up in insurance and banking. Not as exciting, but it paid the bills. Now, my friend Mark Evans, he had a big dream too. Mark grew up in a small town in California, in Southern California, called Eagle Mountain. It was a mining town. It was the largest iron ore mine west of the Mississippi. And this is the mine that created all of the minerals that went to steel, that built the infrastructure, the skyscrapers, the cars, and the things that brought America into the modern age. It also made a huge, giant mess. And now it's a ghost town. So that's where we got our start in the mining business. That is not Eagle Mountain. Eagle Mountain is about 4 times the size of that. That dump truck, the wheels are about 10 feet high. Mining is messy. It's required, though, unfortunately, to get a lot of the minerals that we need to build the products that we buy and that we use every day. Okay? So, one day Mark comes to me and he wants to share his dream, and he says, Aaron, do you want to be an engineer again? And I said, God, I would love to. I'm so bored pushing paper. What are we going to do? And he says to me, I want to go clean up the mess my dad and the men like him made in the Southwest. I want to go to all those tailing piles and old mine sites and clean them up, recover the minerals they left behind, and I want to do it with green technology and environmentally safe. And I said, oh, is that all? And I said, well, it is awesome. So what's the plan? How are we going to do that? And he looked me dead in the eye and he said, you're the engineer, figure it out. What did I walk into, right? So we engineers, we have this innate drive inside of us to fix things, solve problems, and to make the world a better place, at least in my case, what we want to do. So what else did I have? What other choice? You know, that's what we're going to do. Challenge accepted. Let's go. So we went to work. We put together some crack people, some good teams, and after a couple of years, we actually did create a way to recover all those minerals, precious minerals, gold, platinum, silver, everything else that we needed in our electronics. We got that with a green chemistry and technology, and we figured that out. But as we also discovered something else. There's another problem out there called electronic waste. It's a massive problem. I think we all know about it, but I don't think everybody knows the vast amount of the problem that's there. When we do a gold mine recovery, you get about 1 gram of gold per ton of dirt or ore. Electronic waste is about 100 to 200 grams per ton. So this for us was a no-brainer. We're like, we did an immediate pivot and said, guess what? We're in the electronic waste business because our technology also worked on that. So we delved into the e-waste markets and how e-waste is handled in the US. And quite frankly, it was a bit disturbing because how it's handled is basically as a logistics problem. We don't really recycle those things here in the States. We send them overseas to be burned in giant smelters or to be left on landfills in foreign countries. The process is extremely messy. It creates a lot of pollution and greenhouse gases. It poisons the land. It makes people sick. It shortens their life expectancy. But here's the kicker. If we can do that here, all the things we need to build tomorrow's products, we already have in our waste stream. We just had to figure that out. So that's what we did. We opened our plant earlier this year. Our environmentally green technology actually is able to take out those critical minerals, recycling the waste, keeping the minerals here in the United States. We have a reduction of about 90% for greenhouse gases and for water usage while we do it. That's our facility in Carlsbad, California that John mentioned. Not too shabby. We do about 20 million pounds a year of circuit boards, where most of the critical minerals are, and we're building more facilities around the country. Now, people came to us and said, hey, why the hell would you do this in California with all the environmental laws? And our whole point of doing it there was that if you can do it in California, you can do it anywhere in the world. So that's what we did. But my challenge to you, and I'm going to leave you with this, since this is a lightning round, it can be done. We hear from all these people, politicians, everybody else, that, hey, I've got to solve this problem to save the planet for my kids and my grandkids. Well, that time's past. It's now that it has to work. Gen Z, you future leaders, everybody else, let's work on this problem together and solve it so we can save our planet and keep everything alive. All right? Thank you very much.
Hello, hello. Welcome. All right. So we're here to talk a little bit about Gen Z's role in the circular economy. For those of you who don't know, Gen Z is the demographic group born in the mid-1990s and between the early 2010s. So they're about 27 and younger. They're in college and increasingly becoming a leader in the workspace. And so we're here to talk about their impact on the circular economy. And joining us, we have 3 amazing young panelists who will introduce themselves, and we're just gonna jump right into it, okay? So we know that the circular economy and circularity in general doesn't have one singular definition. In fact, there could be many. But when you think about circularity, and you think about the circular economy, what comes to mind for you?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question. And for me in particular, I take it back all the way to my roots. I'm a first-generation American, so my parents, born in Africa and South America respectively, had a huge impact in my life growing up. And visiting those countries in addition to the New York City metropolitan area where I was growing up, waste definitely felt wrong to me, but I couldn't put a word onto why until the COVID-19 pandemic when I was in university around 2020 to 2021. When we realized that waste was piling up in the trash cans because of single-use increase within our campus community, that's when I realized that there's no such thing as throwing something away. When we implemented composting and being able to see the campus community become brighter, become more positive towards the use of composting, it led me down this path that I am now, completely passionate about circularity and knowing that there needs to be something that we do about it, no matter how young or old we are.
Wow, what a way to kick off. Agreed. I think I have a couple points to add to that. Circular economy is this zero waste model that will allow humanity to restructure its relationship with our planet. That was pretty powerful to me when first explained. I think I've distilled it into intentional design, responsible consumption, and systematic reuse. I think those pieces fit together in different ways that are often more nuanced than people think at surface level, and it takes some time to get comfortable with and to grapple with those ideas. For me, I think the consume responsibly is the piece that often translates the quickest to different audiences. As a Gen Z representative here, I think my outfit is resold, and that is probably the only way I like to shop. So that's how I differ from my folks and my family. That's what circular economy looks like for me.
Yeah, I think I completely resonate with what Soraya and Destana are saying. I think from a very young age, we were engaged into this idea of what is happening to our planet, how can we make it better? And I think that's why, I don't know, throughout my childhood, I always tried to either I want to be a doctor, I want to be an astronaut, or something of great impact. And then I found that you could do that through supply chain. And for me, it was that's a better position where I could be and make a difference, right? So I think that, yeah, we are a generation that cares, and also we are the generation that will suffer more from this climate change and environmental impact.
Yeah, that's such an important point because, yes, we are the generation that is going to be impacted by these, by our economy and any lack of sustainability, both now and into the future. And so as you think about Generation Z, how are you looking at how Generation Z is engaging with circularity or even leading in circularity?
Yeah, I can start off. Well, 93% of us, understand that addressing climate change is fundamental to our future. And I think that's a really, really important starting point. The generations above have had a harder uphill battle to fight in, convincing. But I think that 93 number tells you everything you need to know around political discourse, and if this population doesn't believe this, then how long does that stifle change? The people who are affected, the people who are going to have to deal with it and live our entire lives talking about it, discussing it, finding solutions for it, implementing those solutions in real time, we understand and we get it. And I think that we are demonstrating that with some of our consumption choices. We're looking for it in design, we're demanding it from the corporates that we're buying products from. I'd say it's exciting, and it's an optimistic outlook that we're leading with.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting what Destana is saying, because even from our consumption behavior, from our interests, from what we value, it's completely different from other generations. Or I feel that we've seen a change of what are the things that are more important to us, and that we're willing to make a change for it, right? Additionally, I think that what you mentioned, Brian, that we're entering the workforce and we have this new mindset, as well as a new way of education and preparation. So I think that apart from attracting people to the industry is how can we keep these new generations in the workforce, how can we train them and accelerate their growth so that they are in leadership positions where they actually can make a difference?
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And to think about that idea of consumption and the way that Gen Z in particular is changing it, I read a study recently by McKinsey in which Gen Z identifies the idea of consumption as access rather than possession, and that completely changed the way that I thought about my generation in particular. And I just love that when you're thinking about streaming versus buying CDs or ride sharing versus owning a car, we're changing the landscape and the way that we are using and buying products and services. So not only are we forcing the hand of companies to change, but at the same time, we're able to be part of that workforce to enact that change and see creatively through our own lived experiences how we can enact that change.
Yeah. Yes, thank you. And so you mentioned some of the differences between Gen Z and some of the other generations, previous generations, and Soraya, you were mentioning some of the differences. Do either of you all want to elaborate on any other differences that you see in the way Gen Z is approaching the circular economy or just circularity in general that differ from previous generations? What stands out to you?
Well, I think there's a sense of urgency, right? Time is limited, and we do see that 1.5 degrees even closer. We know all of our sustainability goals in our companies are set to 2030. We know, right? And we've seen all these studies that it's no longer a theory, but actually something that is going to happen. So we are thirsty for it, right?
Yeah.
Agreed. Nothing to add.
Nice. And Gen Z is a unique generation that, has grown up in many respects on social media. What are the ways that technology and media and just the ways that Gen Z engages with one another and the world, what are the ways in which those systems are now impacting how you all are looking at sustainability? What are the types of conversations that you all are having? And how are social media and kind of these new technologies influencing the ways that you all are engaging with this topic?
Like many things, it's both a good and a bad thing, of course, to have such huge access to social media, to have access to the news stories that are both positive and extremely negative. So we definitely have to keep in mind our personal mental health, but at the same time, in terms of the positives, you're able to see what others are doing, whether it's in your own city or community or within the globe. And I think that that's something that's changed what I thought was possible for my career, and being able to picture myself in the shoes of someone else and to use those more equitable solutions that someone else might be coming up with to make sure that we're making actionable change that is equitable for all.
Love it.
Yeah, harnessing that power of the creator, I think, is the term we've defined for the influencers and TikTokers and that community. They have a really, really unique way of engaging with the world that I think former creative talent hasn't been able to as easily tap into. You pick up your phone and there's your audience. I think that's really powerful. And a story that comes to mind that's recent is I was on Instagram and found, I want to say it was Creative Kitchen. I'm reaching there, so that might not be the account. It was some account from a gentleman who kind of takes every single ingredient that he cooks with, every food that he finds at the grocery store, comes home, uses that to prepare a meal, and then uses the byproducts to create something, whether it's spray to keep bugs off your plant, something even our generation is starting to face as we move into our own apartments and buy those first plants to make it feel like home. Whether it's a spray or whether it's a new plant. So I introduced that to my mom, who is a kindergarten teacher and probably the biggest circular economy representative I know. And she has since found a way to grow green onions in our kitchen. So it happens like that, it's really powerful.
That's awesome.
And I think these are clear examples of the process of these tools, right? I think it's a way in which we have higher visibility and awareness. yeah, we can argue many things of the downsides, but at least that's a way in which we can know or try to start knowing what's going on elsewhere in the world. And at the end, connecting the dots and saying, well, I feel that it's approachable for me to go there and say, hey, I am interested in that too. How about we embrace the synergies that we can have together?
For sure.
I love that.
Yeah, it's like this sixth sense that we were born with, kind of this access to the internet and an ability to navigate.
Now we have superpowers.
That too, exactly. That's exactly what I'm saying. And now with that, right, we have so much connectivity that solutions can travel really fast. You know, as we speak to accelerating the transition here, I think there's no better way to do that than a swipe or a click, you know. There's no quicker way to do that, I should say.
For sure.
Yeah, and I think that's what we also expect at our workplace. Like, if I can access information in such a way, if I am a digital savvy, if I have the skills, that's what I'm expecting at the workforce. And that's something that we bring value to.
Yeah.
We are tech savvy, we are more detail oriented, and we are good at storytelling. So those are other superpowers that we have.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. Much of our audience might be leaders at companies. They might not be Gen Z. They might be a little older. And so I'm wondering whether or not there's any advice that you all might give to our audience in terms of being able to connect with and engage with your generation, or you specifically. You don't have to speak for your entire generation. But when you think about the circular economy, you know, what are different ways that you know, people in our audience who might be, again, leaders at companies, and how can they engage with you all in a way that is beneficial or fruitful?
Yeah, well, I feel that right now we're in a place that multiple generations are working at the same time. And that brings us the opportunity to have thought diversity. That's one thing that I like to see. One is this idea of experience that comes with years, and also these, other analogous tools that you use. But that also brings value to us. So I feel like we should not draw the line like you're that generation, I'm this generation, and we should stop having these excuses that because you're young or because you're old, we don't understand each other. I feel like, age or youth is a construct. If we're able to pass that, then we can collaborate better. And it's, thank you. But yeah, I feel that that's the way, and this is the time where we're giving that opportunity.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think this one study that I saw recently stuck out to me from Yale. About 51% of business school graduates were willing to accept a lower salary to work for an employer who prioritized and valued environmental sustainability. I'm sure that extends to other forms of sustainability as well. So to the employers, to the people in power and the decision makers, give them that opportunity and attract that top talent, right? Create circular economy avenues that are better for the firm and attract that top talent. I think that's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
But by no means lower the salaries. That part, that didn't make sense. That was an error. Yeah.
I completely agree with that. And from the consumer perspective as well, I was actually having a conversation with one of the emerging leaders that brought up this thought for me about not just having transparency when you're presenting these kinds of statistics about sustainability endeavors to consumers, but making it understandable and clear in layman terms what it means for them specifically in their day-to-day life. Because as sustainability professionals, I think we can get like a bit in the weeds about what these definitions mean, and they can be very varied, especially in the circularity context. So I think breaking it down into digestible terms to avoid greenwashing is also extremely important as we're considering Gen Z.
For sure. Nice. Well, so as we think about solutions, when you think about what's missing from the conversation around circularity or the circular economy, or maybe even who's missing, what comes to mind for you?
I think definitely supply chain is missing in the conversation. I think we are an afterthought of, okay, this is the initiative of the project, everyone chimes in and brings their perspective, but then at the end, we're not involved in the conversation from the beginning. And when it's time to actually materialize that idea, it's like, oh, we have to go and find the supply chain and logistics and operations. What should we do? Mm-hmm. And at that moment, then it's so urgent then that you need to fulfill that goal, that at the end the feasibility is not there. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I think that supply chain is a big part of it. I feel it's the muscles and the tendons and everything that actually creates movement and action. So yeah, let's start having conversations.
Yeah, go supply chain.
So true.
Yeah.
So true. Yeah, everything that, from an investor perspective at regeneration.vc, we're looking at solutions on the design, the use and reuse side, the materials, brands, and the systems to recapture used products and materials. Those solutions stem from or rely nearly 100% on the supply chains, the partners that they operate with, the different countries and locales where they operate. That stuff really makes decisions for us as a firm when we're looking at those companies. So it's exciting to see the innovators who have really baked in, work with supply chain partners who understand what they're doing and who are, certified and how they're going about it. So that's really important to us.
For sure.
I agree. When we're considering this also, I do believe that Gen Z is missing from the conversation. By 2030, we'll contribute about 30% of the workforce globally, not just in the United States. So I think it's really important to make sure that you're mentoring and bringing up Gen Z within sustainability-specific roles, because what I've seen a lot in older professionals within this space is they'll transition from a specialty, whether it's supply chain, marketing, PR, into a more sustainability-specific role. But it's really incredibly important to consider that as we're growing up, Gen Z is more of a specialist within sustainability itself. So how can you leverage that and make sure that you're recruiting top talent and making sure that you're mentoring them appropriately as well?
Yes, yes. Nice. So we have a couple minutes here. I'm wondering if very quickly you wouldn't mind hopping in my time machine and taking us 15 years into the future, and maybe speaking personally, where are you and where are you within this circular economy? How does it look? Just paint a picture for me if you can.
So a small ask.
So a small ask, yeah. What does future look like for you when you think about the circular economy?
I think an educated consumer base is what I think of the most. That's something that I saw a lot, especially throughout my university career and throughout my internships and my current experience. The idea that a consumer who doesn't really know that much about sustainability at least knows what goes in what bin and what can be reusable is really important, and someone who can actually leverage the materials that they have in their house to reuse it, or they're taking advantage of secondhand shops within their community. I think that's going to be extremely important as we're moving forward to prepare for that next step in the circular economy.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, ditto. Repeating something I mentioned earlier, I think we see these pieces come into play. I think they, take a leading role in how we construct new businesses, make new products. I think we design intentionally, we consume responsibly, and we reuse systematically. I think shared usage is an exciting piece broadly. Re-commerce, resold clothing, or shared products and appliances in apartment buildings, for example. I think that's really, really important to our generation. One, because we're cheap. Two, because we like stuff for a short amount of time, and then we want to get rid of it and get something new. And this allows for that, right? This works towards what we're looking for as consumers, and it makes business sense. It gives you data into what happens after that product is sold the first time, where it goes, whose hands it touch, when it breaks. I think that's really, really valuable to understanding. So it's the full loop being built at the same time. And I'm optimistic. I think in 15 years we get somewhere close.
Nice. Well, I'm going to leave it there. Thank you so much to our panel. Really appreciate you. Yes. Ready? Cool.
I've been excited about that panel discussion ever since I started thinking about this keynote 7 months ago, so it did not disappoint. Those people make me really excited for the future. Now for our last lightning talk of the day before we wrap up, I'm excited to bring Michelle Lee from IDEO up onto the stage. Michelle's going to talk to us about using play in our design process. Just in case you didn't see it, I've got it written on my hand to remind me, from 4:30 to 5:30 tomorrow, IDEO is going to dig into this concept deeper in one of our breakout sessions, so be sure to check that out if you're interested. I have 2 young kiddos at home, so I see the power of play every day, and I'm really excited to learn more about this. So please welcome Michelle Lee, Partner and Managing Director at IDEO, to the Circularity stage.
Hi, I'm Michelle, and I come to you from IDEO. IDEO is a design firm that takes a human-centric approach to helping companies navigate change. And over time, there have been a couple different times when companies have had to really change their behavior. One of them was the industrial era, when we came up with new manufacturing processes and companies redefined what efficiency was. And then we had the digital era, and that's when we redefined our relationship with information, how we process it and how we transfer it. Today, we find ourselves in the climate era, and like those 2 previous eras, it's going to affect all industries and require us to redefine everything that we have. And because you're here today, you've likely already embraced that challenge, and that's great. But we also know that sometimes it can feel a little bit like this. It's really daunting to try to convert a whole organization to new ways of thinking. And it's especially hard when you literally see the world burning around you. But we think that working in climate can and should feel a little bit more like this. We're really excited for it to come, and we're meeting it with optimism and joy. Now, we know it's a big shift from what's on the left to what's on the right, but the good news is we all know how to be a little bit more like Winnie the Pooh, because there was a time in our lives that we took on the big unknown, and we did it with curiosity, with agency, and with joy. It's when we were kids, and we did this through play. Here's how. So 1, we were really great at expanding our playgrounds. We invited other kids to join us to make the magic. And today, one of the things we really love to do is we got to go back 1. I thought that video was going to play. There should be a video, but anyways, we work with clients who want to bring their internal teams and their external partners along as they think about things from a circular design perspective. And oftentimes, we'll bring together product, engineering, design, also brand, marketing, customer service, and more, because we need those different perspectives in the room. But because we're so often working in silos, we use play to break down the barriers, to increase the conversation and the information flow. So we're learning from each other, and that before we know it, we're throwing out wild ideas, really innovative ideas that break beyond what we normally see. And if we're really successful, by the end, we're all really comfortable doing skits in front of each other, where we're trying out future scenarios and seeing what might work and what might not work, and getting feedback from each other. We really benefit from that idea of having people with different perspectives and expertise in the room. Number 2, as kids, we build to think. We don't spend all our time talking or strategizing. We actually pick things up and we start to build. And from that, we learn what works and what doesn't work, and then we evolve our ideas and keep going. So when we worked with H&M, and I apologize, are these videos not playing? Sorry, these should be videos. But in working with H&M, we worked with them to tackle the excess inventory that they have that often ends up in landfill. And they've tried to tackle these challenges in the past. But when they did, they spent a lot of time strategizing, and we really pushed them to bias to action. And in doing so, we started off by talking to people throughout the supply chain and understanding what some of the challenges were. And a lot of those had to do with just helping to have more conversation across that supply chain and having more data be flowing across the different people within that supply chain. Once we had that and knew that was the issue, we were then able to go to Excel and create quick prototypes because it was quick, easy, and familiar. And that allowed us to quickly get to pilots, which through pilots, we soon learned that we could decrease the amount of inventory by 22% while increasing sales by 34%. And those numbers were enough to really get buy-in across the organization, while also helping us get confidence that the approaches we were taking were working. Okay, number 3. As kids, we were really great at taking puddles and turning them into splash zones. And this is really important because when we're talking about sustainable solutions, oftentimes we think of it as a sacrifice. We think we're gonna have to choose something that's more expensive, that's less convenient, or less appealing. And it doesn't have to be that way. Remember when we were kids and we would see a puddle and we didn't just worry about getting our shoes wet, we actually jumped in with both feet and had the time of our lives. And that's what we did when we worked with Melissa and Doug. They asked us to go with a constraint that we could only use wood as a material. And we took that wood and we realized that the constraint would actually propel our thinking, help us focus on solutions. And we saw the heft and how great that felt, how the weight made it really possible to drop the wood, have it roll, and how when we took 2 pieces of wood and clanked them together, they just made an amazing sound. And that led to the whole Go Tots line, that is their new line of toys for infants and toddlers. So in conclusion, I want to say thank you for what you do to design for the climate era. We know it's not easy, but we hope that when the going gets tough, you can channel your inner child and remember a time when you used play to take on the unknown with curiosity, with agency, and with joy. Thank you.
All right, well, that concludes our first day here on the keynote stage. Remember, we have 90 more minutes tomorrow. And now we're actually going to go into our first networking break of the event, our first long networking break. I spoke earlier about moving from intention to action. Well, we've definitely made progress. We heard today how much we have left to do. Our hope is that you can draw inspiration and partnerships from this week and go away from this conference with a little more enthusiasm than you came with. Speaking of moving forward through this program, we have that full 60-minute network break coming up here. So be sure to check out the expo while you're mixing and mingling. After that 60 minutes, we'll have our first breakout session of the week. I am really proud of this breakout program that we've put together. So if you see Sue Zoki or Corey Goldberg from our team, know that they're the masterminds behind the whole thing and say thank you. They've done some amazing work. Speaking of breakouts, the numbers for this week: 1,400 people, 250 speakers, 50 breakout sessions, 60 hours of content. So much going on. Please try to take in as much of it as you can. At the close of the day, don't forget to join us for our opening reception from 5 to 7. It'll take place on all the foyers between the 3rd and 5th floors. And with that, go forth. We'll see you tomorrow.
It sounds like an exaggeration to say that we've just entered the most consequential decade in the history of humanity, but it's not.
We have all recognized that we have to do something.
Either we're going to do it, or nobody's going to do it.
But is it our responsibility? Yeah, it 100% is a responsibility.
Enough is enough.
That you cannot do it alone.
We're only going to succeed if we work together.
Climate is a team sport.
A meeting of the minds.
That's why we joined the Climate Pledge. We want to work with the other signatories.
The pledge is by design business friendly.
Benefit goes to the team.
We want to inspire others to come along with us.
It's about unleashing innovation from business leader to investor to city leader to national government.
10 years early.
We are targeting 2039 carbon neutral.
2035.
Carbon neutral by 2020.
You can do it.
We knew we had to lead by example.
The ambitious goals are not there to scare us, they are there to challenge us.
Change the goalposts of what's possible.
And make it a movement.
If we're not being part of the solution, we are part of the problem. There is no in between.
To help reduce plastic waste in our environment, America's beverage companies
are carefully designing our bottles
to be 100% recyclable. That means every bottle that's recycled
can be turned into material we use to make new bottles. Please help us get every bottle back.
We are live. Wow, what a first keynote session that was, Nathra.
It was. Welcome back to Sidebar. I'm Nathra. This is Kenny. We're here to discuss all the things that we loved about the keynote while bringing you guys along with Circularity 2030. I just want to start by saying I loved the land acknowledgement by Alyssa Macy. It was such a grounding experience, and it was also interesting to see her take on land acknowledgements and stating that that's not enough with moving the movement forward, but still a great way to bring Indigenous communities into the conversation. Also loved the art installations by Washed Ashore. So cool that they were, circular in nature and literally made from ocean plastics. What was something that you enjoyed, Kenny?
Yeah, I think what Alyssa really brings home for me is this idea of stewardship. And it's not enough to... there's a lot of words that get tossed around when we're describing how we use the resources that we're taking, but stewardship is one of those phrases that really gets to the heart of what I think we're all trying to do, which is to protect this planet and this place for future generations, and really, we borrow it from our future, right? And I think that's really what hits home for me when we're talking about the Indigenous folks that have been here since we were here in the first place.
Agreed. And these folks who have literally laid the foundation for us, and have so many circular practices deeply ingrained in their culture and ancestral practices that we can, see so much exemplary knowledge in, which is incredible.
And kind of like almost an intuitive sense of what it means to live in a circular way, an appreciation for the species that we rely upon, not just for our food, but for our culture and our way of life. And I think it's really impactful to always pay attention to that. Very grounding as well.
Absolutely. And I'm so excited to just kick off all of the great people that we're going to interview during this sidebar session. One being Ava Gladdick, who's going to be joining us soon from Metabolic. And we also have Holly Alexander from Eastman Chemical, as well as Elizabeth Chamberlain from iFixit, and Susan Fife Harris from the city of Seattle. So many great speakers coming up, and I think a lot of them are going to touch on the multifaceted approaches to circularity.
Yeah, I think what we're also going to probably hear at Circularity, how it happens at different scales. And I know, Metabolic might take more of a systems lens and an analytical approach, where Susan, I think, is going to be able to talk more about the day-to-day bias towards action, what it's like in the city of Seattle. So, and everywhere in between, I think we're going to hear from the systems, to the products, to the places that in the built environment. So I'm really excited for that as well.
I agree. I think we should have a commercial.
Okay. All right. One of your favorite highlights from before?
I really loved hearing from the Gen Z speakers. I was shocked to find out that I was a part of Gen Z. I always thought that I was a millennial.
Nope, you.
But yes. And we'll be right back coming up soon.
Let's face it, the world has a problem: plastic waste. But what if that waste could be broken down to its original building blocks and then used to create new materials? It would be better than recycled. It would be renewed, making for infinitely better materials. At Eastman, we're revolutionizing recycling at the molecular level. Our advanced technologies recycle almost any plastic waste an infinite number of times. Not only will this divert waste from landfills, it will also reduce greenhouse gas emissions. The end products will be identical to those produced with virgin or non-recycled content. So what do you see? Waste? At Eastman, we see possibilities.
As the world moves forward with new ideas, new technologies, and new challenges, International Paper forges ahead to help make the world better, safer, and more sustainable. From planet-friendly packaging to pulp for absorbent products, our 39,000 employees worldwide transform renewable resources from sustainably managed forests into products people depend on every day. We're International Paper, and we're creating what's next.
To protect the climate, we're changing in ways that might surprise you.
Welcome back. We're joined by Eva from Metabolic. Would you care to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Eva Gladek. I'm the founder and CEO of an organization called Metabolic, which is actually a group of organizations. Around 10 years ago, I set it up with the idea of, I was getting really frustrated with the lack of action and implementation in the sustainability space, and I wanted to create a systems change agency that would do really good analysis and understand, why things were going wrong, but then actually put our money where our mouth is and implement stuff and get stuff done. So Metabolic has grown into a group of 5 core organizations that span the kind of space from analysis through implementation in the circular economy and sustainability field.
Wow.
That's great, Eva. We have a question for you. How should companies approach measuring themselves against circular goals from your organization's perspective?
Good question. So there's a lot of different frameworks that are out there on circular economy and sustainability, and I actually think that a lot of them are too high level and permissive. So there's lots of frameworks that look at organizational readiness or the leadership capabilities within an organization and kind of stop there. Whereas actually, I think it's really important for companies to have a deep understanding of all of their material flows. So if you're talking about, how circular are you as a company, you need to understand all the resources, energy, materials, water that you're pulling out of the world, and how you're converting those into products or services, and how effectively you're doing that, and what's happening downstream as well. So you really need to have that full chain perspective, and also ideally over a longer time span. So not just like within one cycle of use, but really over decades. And then you start getting a real metric of how circular you are, or how you're contributing to circularity, and that starts to influence the way you approach product design, service design, your approach to policy. And actually very few organizations do that, but Metabolic actually supports our consultancy, supports organizations in getting their full footprints, and then you can complement that with these types of more these metrics that look at policies and capabilities and all of that stuff that's quite important, but really doesn't get to the nuts and bolts of how circular you are. So,
wow. Is there, just to kind of unpack that a little bit more, talking about systems change, and you just touched on a few different sort of levels of zooming in. What would you say is maybe an ideal level to sort of evaluate a business or from, and when it comes to thinking about how detailed do you want to get when you're starting out?
So systems change is a topic that gets thrown around a lot now.
Absolutely.
And I think, when we're talking about systems change, the key thing is that it's not about what one company is doing. It's about what we're all doing, what society is doing. And increasingly what we're seeing is that companies, they have to understand their own direct impacts, but they have to understand themselves in the context of the rest of the world. So many of the problems that we need to solve, or things that we need to change to move to a really circular economy, can't be addressed by individual organizations. So they have to build innovation ecosystems. They have to start linking up with parties up and down stream of their own activities, and they have to start understanding what policies have to change, what sort of level playing field do we need to get to actually enable some of the transition elements to take place. And it's also ultimately about letting go of ego and personal success, because ultimately if you're the only one doing something, it doesn't matter how awesome it is, you're not changing the system.
Right.
So these things that we want to see have to become so ubiquitous in the world that you can't even trace them back to a point of origin. And that involves being a little selfless and humble, and even as a company, dropping the ego and saying, actually, we want everyone to copy this. We need to figure out how things can replicate and design incentives for these solutions to replicate across whole sectors.
Wow.
That's a great point, Eva, sorry.
No worries.
That's a great point. I think that I always tell my colleagues that working in the sustainability field, it's one of the true privileges to never really feel like your competitors are your enemies, but rather your competitors are your inspiration, because this is a field where the people who are moving the needle forward faster are increasing and taking everyone with them at the same time. So I think that your point to letting go of ego is so important, especially in circularity, so we can influence others to follow along with us.
Well, at least that's how it should be. But realistically, sometimes in the civil society space and the sustainability space, there's more competition, ironically, than in the private sector. And I would say that's because there's a scarcity or perceived scarcity of resources. So rather than focusing on really working together and building bonds between ourselves, there's all this fragmentation under the pot of funding that there is to do this work, and that's not how it should be. And this is partly because, for example, out of all the philanthropy that's going on worldwide, 1% goes to environmental issues.
Wow.
And we're facing one of the biggest sustainability we're facing an existential crisis here, but the resources aren't coming to the sector.
It's less existential by the day, it feels like, especially I think hearing from the Gen Z folks that they're growing up in this world. It's very much an immediate problem.
I mean, existential in the sense that it's a threat to our existence.
Yes.
Absolutely. Right. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. We have to head to our next segment, but we'd love to hear more from you and look forward to hearing about your experience at Circularity 2030.
Yeah, thanks so much.
No problem.
Thank you.
In 2022, LyondellBasell unlocked possibilities. To end plastic waste in the environment, we launched a new circular and low-carbon solutions business unit. We're increasing our recycling capacity and investing in recycling infrastructure to secure access to plastic waste feedstock, and we are advancing recycling innovation. We're creating solutions for everyday sustainable living.
Beauty is a powerful force that moves us, a force that can be used to help preserve our world. That's why at L'Oreal Group, we create the beauty, with 61% of our natural ingredients being bio-based or derived from abundant minerals in 2022. And that recycles 100% of our industrial water by 2030. At L'Oreal Group, we create the beauty that moves the world.
Hi, welcome to Sidebar, Holly. So I would love to hear a little bit more about you before we get started into some of the questions that Kenny and I have for you.
Great. Yeah, so Holly Alexander, I actually work in sustainability for Eastman. We're a raw material supplier based in Kingsport, Tennessee. So really excited to talk to you guys about some of the things that we're doing.
Wow.
Great.
Amazing.
Thanks so much, Holly. I mean, just to start off with a question about challenges, what are some of the challenges that you face in creating a circular economy in this field?
Yeah, great question. Lots of challenges. We have no shortage of challenges. But from an Eastman standpoint, as a raw material supplier, one of the things that we're working on are plastics, right? Plastics have a lot of great environmental opportunity, but there are a lot of challenges around them, and it's challenging to recycle them sometimes. So where Eastman is playing is we've been a virgin plastic manufacturer for decades, and what we're doing now is we're looking at technologies that give us a chance to start to use plastics and textiles and things like that have already been used and take those back and use them as basically the feedstocks to make plastics and new materials from them. So we're producing them from goods that have already been done instead of extracting hydrocarbons from the earth to make new materials. So we're really excited, but we're leaning in with this technology called molecular recycling to really reimagine and produce the materials that many of our customers are already used to using and show up in the products that we all touch every day.
And just to make sure I understand, I'm not lost here, you're talking about post-consumer plastics?
Yeah, so
and turning that
post-consumer,
into
yeah, absolutely. And I think from an Eastman standpoint, like, we don't want any plastics to go to the landfill or go to incineration unnecessarily. So there might be streams where you have pre-consumer material, but the focus and really what we're trying to get and what we want to source is going to be post-consumer, because those are the items that need a new home. We don't want them going to landfill. We don't want them going there, but it's a chance for us to start to pull those in. But whether it's textiles or carpet or packaging that isn't a good candidate for mechanical recycling.
Right. No, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, great. And for companies that are beginning to make this transition towards more circular solutions, what advice do you have, given your experience at Eastman working on circularity?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's really complicated, I think, to jump into this space. And I think what we find is that for a lot of material companies, we do innovation, we do product innovation. So what we do is we create a new product based on a demand from a customer, and we put it on the market, right? This is so different because now we're dealing with system change, right? And so now it's not just necessarily that we're making something different, but how do we get this broader system to embrace it? So when we think about molecular recycling, where do we get the plastics? Because you know what? Nobody's just collecting stuff and piling it up in case there might be an end market. So how do we create those? How do we start to get definitions of recycling and recycled content to reflect a new paradigm for this? But most importantly, you really have to think within this broader system, is the solution creating the change that you want? From Eastman's standpoint, we want to make sure that these technologies adhere to a reduce, reuse, recycle model, right? This isn't an excuse to proliferate the world with more plastics, but how can we make them differently? We also want to make sure that it's very complementary to mechanical recycling. So how do we fit these things in together so they can work more closely together? But we also, it's really important too, to understand what that broader stakeholder set thinks about it and where their concerns are. When you think about policymakers or standard setters, or if you're thinking about environmental NGOs, there are a lot of concerns around these technologies, and we need to make sure that they are as environmentally benign as possible, and we need to make sure that from an environmental justice standpoint that we're not creating any additional harm in the environment. So a lot of work to do and a lot of communication, but it's complex topics, and it's tough where we're playing right now.
Of course.
I had a question just kind of on that point of this molecular recycling aspect. Do the companies kind of, once I maybe get that feedstock, or that sort of regenerated material, you could say maybe, is it known that this started from post-consumer and now it's been completely recycled, or?
Great question. Thank you, actually, for bringing that up. One thing that's really important we found is that trying to get certification so that we can more clearly talk about what we're doing, because in some cases this matters a lot to brands. Brands have a lot of commitments for recycled content goals. But what Eastman is doing, and where a lot of this work is happening, is through highly validated and accredited third-party certification systems, so that we can make sure that we're accounting appropriately for the recycled content that's coming in instead of virgin material, and then what we're producing on the back end. But it's all a little bit new and different. So that's where we are today.
Wow, that's enlightening.
Yep. Thank you so much, Holly. We really appreciate you being here with us today, and we hope you enjoy the rest of your Circularity 23 experience.
Thank you. It's been fantastic so far.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Enjoy the week.
Appreciate it.
Yep.
Where should I look? I think the camera over there.
Hi, Elizabeth. Welcome. We're so excited to have you, and also to be celebrating iFixit's 20 years of being in service and bringing repair to communities. What does the right to repair mean to your organization?
Yeah, thank you for having me. So the right to repair is the idea that you should be able to fix everything you own. And that means you should be able to fix it yourself if you want to. Or if you don't, you should be able to take it to a repair shop of your choice. And that means maybe an independent shop, maybe a manufacturer's shop. And that means that repairs are more accessible and affordable for everybody.
That's great. And before we ask you another question, I'd like to give you the chance to introduce yourself. My apologies.
Oh, no problem. I'm Liz Chamberlain. I'm iFixit's Director of Sustainability.
Wonderful. And what does your role entail at iFixit?
So for the most part, I'm advocating for right to repair laws. I do some amount of internal sustainability work also, but for us as a company, sustainability means repair, because we're really focused on extending product lifetimes and making sure that things last as long as they possibly can, because the vast majority of electronic products' environmental impact happens in the manufacturing stage. So keeping things around for longer is better for the planet.
And speaking of right to repair, I saw you wrote a recent article about a pretty big victory, and I believe it was Minnesota.
That's right.
Can you speak a little bit on what that means for repair and the advancement of repair and circularity?
Yeah, absolutely. So iFixit has been fighting for right to repair legislation for about 10 years. We've been fighting for repairable stuff for all of our 20 years of being around. But we just had the biggest yet right to repair victory in the United States in Minnesota. We passed a very broad right to repair bill that will cover basically everything with a chip, with a small number of exceptions. So that means, consumer electronics, phones and tablets and laptops and smartwatches and all of the above, but also, appliances, small appliances. And it will require basically parity between independent repair shops and manufacturer-authorized repair shops. So everything that's available to manufacturers' shops should be available to independent shops and to people who want to fix things themselves.
Wow. And maybe just kind of thinking about your 20-year mark so far, can you tell us a little bit about how maybe manufacturers have changed their approach to the repair movement?
Absolutely, yeah. So for the first, 10, 15 years we were around, we were calling for more repairable stuff and really kind of heard crickets. We didn't hear a whole lot from manufacturers. But things have really changed in the last few years, and we've started to have manufacturers approach us and ask, what can we be doing here? How can we make things more fixable? How can we make it so that people can fix things themselves? And so we've actually started some collaborations directly with some big manufacturers. So we now are the official repair parts and tools provider for Google and for Samsung and for a couple of other big companies also. And so we're really interested in strategizing with companies, talking with them about how they can do this thing.
Does that mean you're also kind of working with their design teams?
Absolutely, yeah. So for some companies, we're working on parts and tools, but we also provide repairability assessments. So we will look at products at the design stage, and our teardown engineers, who have many of them 20 years of experience taking things apart and trying to categorize what makes them more and less repairable. And 20 years of listening to our user base, people who are fixing things themselves, talking about what makes things more and less repairable. They will give feedback on designs at the very beginning stage.
That's wonderful. And when speaking on repair and reuse in the circularity space, what do you view as one of the biggest opportunities?
Ooh. I mean, I think that manufacturers really have a huge opportunity because they're putting stuff out into the world. And if they can think about repair from the very beginning of the design stage, think about making sure that things can be fixable at the end of their life, it really could make a huge difference in the enormous tide of e-waste that we're all faced with.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Wow.
That is a very good point there. And we have about 30 seconds before we have to cut. What is something that you would want our viewers to know when it comes to repair and circularity in general?
I mean, I think for manufacturers, we're interested in talking to folks who do want to increase their options for repair and repair to their customers directly. And for everyone else, I want to say it is possible to fix it yourself. A lot of people are scared too, but once you get in there, you can do it. I've done it.
Yeah, we don't always need to replace.
Exactly.
We can repair.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Thank you so much, Eliz or Elizabeth. We really appreciate you being here today, and we hope that your circularity experience is wonderful.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Great talking
Let's
with
repair.
you. Absolutely.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Appreciate it so much.
Welcome back to the sidebar.
Yes. Welcome, Ashima. How are you today?
I'm good, thank you. How are you both doing?
Doing great. We'd love to hear a little bit about you before we ask you a few questions.
Sure. So my name is Ashima Sukhdev. I work with Seattle Public Utilities, which is the department within the city of Seattle that manages waste and water for the city. I'm our climate and circular economy policy advisor, so I get the very fun job of working on all sorts of circular economy related initiatives for the city of Seattle.
Wow.
And my previous background is working with the Ellen MacArthur Foundation as well on leading our work on cities.
Great. You and Kenny have that in common.
Exactly.
Representing the foundation here.
Absolutely.
Wonderful. And what is the role of the city in Seattle in accelerating the circular economy? What are some of the major initiatives that are going on?
Yeah, I feel like there's so much that city governments and local governments generally can do. In terms of the city of Seattle itself, we're known as kind of a green city. We've been leading when it comes to solid waste management for decades now. And we're now really focusing our efforts on moving upstream and thinking about waste prevention as a city. What city governments can do, I think first and foremost, is to set strategy and direction and share a vision for where the city should be going. So we at the City of Seattle certainly that in Seattle Public Utilities Strategic Business Plan, there's mentions of the circular economy and this idea of being a one water, zero waste, community-centered city. So we're setting strategic direction there. We also run a lot of pilot programs and initiatives ourselves. So we have efforts around reusable packaging, an initiative called Reuse Seattle, where we're supporting local businesses, restaurants, cafes, bars, to move from single-use food and beverage containers to reusable food and beverage containers. We're also doing a lot on food waste prevention and supporting policies at the state level. We're supporting local businesses through accelerator programs. And so there's really a lot going on in the city and a lot that local governments can be doing to support the circular economy transition.
It sounds like you're working with a lot of small businesses as a part of that.
Absolutely.
Can you share a little bit out more specifically around when you say support?
Yeah.
What does that mean in kind of real terms for maybe an entrepreneur or a business owner?
Very practically, it's often financial support. So in our Reuse Seattle initiative, for example, we've just set up an incentive program, a rebate program, where as a cafe, if you want to move from single-use cups to durable cups for in-cafe dining, you can get a $500 rebate from the city to just buy the reusables for your cafe. We also support broader business accelerator programs. We work with the state and county on a Next Cycle Washington program where we basically are providing grant funding to businesses, local businesses that are moving towards a circular economy. And then we also do a lot of community building for local businesses. Events like this one are fantastic, where we've been able to give access to local entrepreneurs to meet each other, to meet with the city, to meet these amazing corporations that are in town. So those are some of the roles that we play working with local business.
Wow, it's inspiring.
It's fun.
That's wonderful, and I see that you have like a a special, spotlight on food waste and reuse. You mentioned like these reuse containers. What does that look like in action?
Yeah. So if you think about a cafe or even like a concert venue that you might go to, right now a lot of the cups you use, sure, the to-go cups are either compostable or recyclable in the city of Seattle. That's a requirement. But at the end of the day, those are still single-use cups. So we want reuse wins on every environmental metric. We want our businesses to be using reusable cups. So they're usually made from a more durable material, either like a stainless steel or a sort of polypropylene plastic cup. And those cups can be washed hundreds of times, and there's sort of all sorts of reuse infrastructure that is created around washing those cups, getting them back to the cafes and the venues. So it's been really fun to see that spread across the city. There's great examples of it going on here, and customers love it. I think the residents love it. It's just a really tangible experience for them when it comes to reuse.
Great. Thank you so much, Ashima. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you for representing the city of Seattle, and we hope that you enjoy your circularity experience.
Yeah, it's great to have you all here. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
It sounds like an exaggeration to say that we've just entered the most consequential decade in the history of humanity, but it's not.
We have all recognized that we have to do something.
Either we're going to do it, or nobody's going to do it.
But is it our responsibility? Yeah, it 100% is our responsibility.
Enough is enough.
But you cannot do it alone.
We're only going to succeed if we work together.
Climate is a team
A
sport.
meeting of the minds.
That's why we joined the Climate Pledge. We want to work with the other signatories.
The pledge is by design business friendly.
Benefit goes to the
We
team.
want to inspire others to come along with us.
It's about unleashing innovation from business leader to investor to city leader to national government.
10 years early.
We are targeting 2039 carbon neutral.
2035.
Carbon neutral by 2020.
You can do it.
We knew we had to lead by example.
The ambitious goals are not there to scare us, they are there to challenge us
Change the goalposts of what's possible.
and make it a movement.
If we're not being part of the solution, we are part of the problem. There is no in between.
To help reduce plastic waste in our environment, America's beverage companies
Are carefully designing our bottles
to be 100% recyclable. That means every bottle that's recycled
can be turned into material we use to make new bottles. Please help us get every bottle back.
So exciting. Great. Well, welcome back to the sidebar. That was some great interviews, Kenny, that we had going on.
Mm-hmm. We got to hear, we just heard from Ashima around the city of Seattle. But what struck home for me is sort of the very tangible approaches that they're taking to supporting small businesses. And I hope and I think that probably could be replicated across cities across the country.
I agree. I think it's really interesting how Ashima mentioned that the city of Seattle has these reusable containers that they can bring to concert venues or small businesses, and this actually encourages citizens to actively participate in behavior change, such as returning a reusable container or scraping food waste into a compost bin. I think when we build these behavior changes into our society, that's how we can really ingrain circularity into daily practices and thinking.
Yeah. Definitely, and I think if we can add a little bit of element of gamification, maybe getting back to that IDO panel around using play as an approach for engaging, I think it'll just act as an even greater incentive for getting folks involved at all ages, basically.
Yes, I agree. And that metric that you were telling me earlier about the e-waste, would you mind repeating that?
Yeah, sure. It kind of blew my mind that 1 ton of e-waste actually has a yield of about over 100 grams of gold. Comparing that to traditional mining, which is 1 ton of mining yields about 1 gram of gold, according to the speaker who talked about some critical raw materials, which only is going to become more important as we kind of approach our finite resources.
I agree, and I think that's just the perfect way to frame and think about this whole, circularity at its root is, waste is treasure. So that e-waste is now e-treasure in a sense in the future. But you know what? It's been such a great day with Sidebar, and I'm excited to see what's coming tomorrow.
Yeah, I just hope everyone starts being circular by default these days. You know, it's the future.
I agree. Well, so good to chat with you today, Kenny, and we're going to be back tomorrow live. So thank you to everyone who joined us on today's live stream.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.